At 8 a.m. on December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese forces.
Because of the dateline, the attack on Pearl Harbor happened in the dead of the night, 2 a.m., December 8, Philippine time. Most of Baguio's residents woke up that morning having no idea at all of what was coming to them in a few hours. At a little past 8 in the morning, people saw airplanes approaching the city. Thinking that these were American planes, some students even cheered as the planes flew directly above Baguio. And when explosions were heard in the distance, they thought that these were guns being fired in Camp John Hay, saluting what they thought was a show of American Air Force might. When the sirens were heard, only then did they realize that what just flew over them were Japanese planes, and the explosions were bombs being dropped over Camp John Hay. Baguio was under attack.
The bombing continued for days, and people started digging and making air raid shelters. All access roads to Baguio were filled with people fleeing to the lowlands, and lowlanders coming up to Baguio believing that it would be much safer for them to be up in the mountains.
From the time of the air raid, the Japanese took more than 2 weeks to reach Baguio on the ground. On December 22, or about 2 weeks since the first attack, the Japanese made their main landings in Lingayen. And as the sun set on December 27, 1941, the Japanese residents of Baguio welcomed the arrival of their countrymen.
It was not easy to have a semblance of normalcy during the Japanese occupation. While there were leaflets being handed out by the Japanese that assured the people that they wanted everyone to return to their respective places and go about their ordinary daily work, these same leaflets ended with a warning.
Do not ever uphold anti-Japanese attitude without accepting the Army's generosity and inflicting unhappy results upon yourselves. To further drive home this point, people would be rounded up, that's people of all ages, from elementary pupils to the elderly, to watch the execution of suspected guerrillas. Here, they were forced to witness different methods of executing prisoners, and this served as a chilling warning to their audience that a similar fate awaited those who harbored anti-Japanese sentiments. The people held on to the promise of General Douglas MacArthur, "I shall return." The promise that one day, the Americans will return to liberate the country from the Japanese.
On September 22, 1944, the sight of American planes flying over the city on their way to bomb Japanese installations at the port of San Fernando, La Union, gave the people of Baguio hope that liberation was just around the corner. A month later, General Douglas MacArthur made good on his promise, landing in Leyte on October 22, 1944. In the meantime, the commander of the Japanese forces in the country, General Tomoyuki Yamashita, moved his headquarters to Baguio.
Momentum was on the side of the liberation forces, and just 2 months later, MacArthur landed in Lingayen, just a few hours' drive away from Baguio. Yamashita's move bode ill for the city of Baguio, for in their efforts to flush the Japanese out, the liberation forces almost completely laid to waste almost half a century of hard work, transforming this once uninhabited pasture land into a beautiful resort town. Different historical accounts would give various reasons for it, but when the Americans did come, they came from the sky, dropping bombs indiscriminately all over the city. Some would say it was a case of inaccurate intelligence reports. Some would say that it was done to flush out the Japanese in preparation for the entry of liberation forces on the ground. Whatever the reason, the fact remains, the American carpet bombing of Baguio City that came on the Ides of March almost completely devastated the whole city. Among the thousands of casualties of that American carpet bombing was Baguio's former mayor, Eusebius Halseman.
Many residents lost their homes and camped out at the Baguio Cathedral for weeks while the city was being bombed relentlessly by the Americans. Food supplies were running low, and General Yamashita was forced to allow thousands of residents to flee the city. Eventually, Yamashita himself was forced to evacuate and fled to Kiangan, leaving only a skeletal force to delay the onslaught of American and Filipino forces already making their way up via Quezon and Aguilian roads.
Baguio was not fully liberated until the end of April 1945, and while battles raged on in different parts of the region, with Japanese forces continuing to resist the inevitable, the Americans decided to use a weapon of mass destruction to force the Japanese to surrender. In the morning of August 6, 1945, the Americans dropped the first atom bomb in Hiroshima, Japan. General Tomoyuki Yamashita, who was making his last stand in Kiangan, Ifugao, surrendered less than a month later.
At the Baguio residence in Camp John Hay, now the U.S. Ambassador's residence in the city, General Tomoyuki Yamashita formally surrendered to the Americans. And the war officially ended.